You know, so many of us can experience self-doubt, have trouble talking about our mental health, or struggle with body image. Our next guest addresses all of those issues through humor. Comedian Aparna Nancherla is the author of Unreliable Narrator, Me, Myself, and Imposter Syndrome. And she joins us now. Aparna, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You have turned self-doubt into comedy gold. And so I wonder, in your book and in your specials, you joke about your personal struggles with depression and anxiety using self-deprecating humor. Tell us why you chose comedy as a sort of coping mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was a pretty shy, introverted kid. And I think comedy, when I discovered it, as a youngster, was kind of a way for me to get out of my own head and connect with other people. I lived so much sort of in my own inner world, and I think comedy gave me a way to bridge my brain to other people's. And I think because there is sometimes a lot of anxiety and depression and self-doubt going on in my brain, it also felt more honest to also lead with those things rather than pretend they aren't taking up so much room inside.
And yet, despite all of your success with specials on HBO and Netflix and Comedy Central and even late night TV, you say that you still feel like the, quote, phony. Where do you think that source of imposter syndrome runs so deeply in you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a kid of immigrants. I think I grew up always kind of trying to play into that assimilationist mentality of wanting to blend in and, you know, draw attention to myself, but in a good way, but not, you know, stick out too much where people are maybe overly scrutinizing you. And I've always just had this feeling that maybe I'm like running to catch up with everyone else in terms of, in life, I've been a lifelong late bloomer.
And I know growing up as an immigrant myself that sometimes you feel a little bit of an outsider, but how much of your imposter syndrome do you think is because of your ethnic identity?
I think that's part of it, but I think for me it's several layers deep. I think it's being maybe a kid of immigrants, a South Asian American woman in an art form that maybe doesn't have a ton of those, but also being, you know, pretty shy and introverted in a very front-facing industry. So I think there's several ways that sometimes make me feel a little bit like a fish out of water. But I've really tried to be upfront about those things as I've navigated my career.
So all of those people who are feeling those lows right now and feeling imposter syndrome, what advice can you give them to help ease the way they see themselves and maybe not give themselves enough credit?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the fact that probably a lot of people are faking it till they make it, so you might feel like you're the only one. And I think a hallmark of imposter syndrome is feeling like, yeah, sure, other people might feel like they don't know what they're doing, but I really don't know what I'm doing. Like, it's sort of, you become convinced of your own truths.
And so how do you cope with what you refer to as internalized racism, this idea that, you know, you're different, but you act, you know, part of the mainstream society? At one point you were quoted as saying, like, I feel sort of white adjacent almost.
Yeah, I mean, especially as a South Asian American, sometimes I think my group falls into that model minority. I think Indian Americans, you know, are some of the highest wealth earners in the country right now. So I think sometimes there's just this idea that we're all like successful, perfect, you know, high achieving, but that doesn't speak for our whole group. We're not a monolith, and we're also three-dimensional people, and a lot of us are, you know, maybe struggling under the surface, and it's not just this like picture perfect.
And we know that comedy is also a very male-dominated industry. How is that playing into the imposter syndrome? Because I know that a lot of women feel that way in the workplace vis-a-vis their male counterparts.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this a little in my book about just how imposter syndrome is often marketed towards women and minorities as something they might experience, or other marginalized groups. But anyone can experience it, but I think it's also important to realize, like, sometimes it's the water you're swimming in that's the problem and not you being the fraud.
Yeah, let's clean up the water, Aparna. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us and for adding your voice to that conversation. Your new book is getting rave reviews. Unreliable Narrator, Me, Myself, and Imposter Syndrome is available now wherever books are sold. Thank you, Aparna.
Thanks. Thanks, Juju. Thanks for having me.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.